Welcome back to Oregon, to the Arctic. We pick up this episode where we left off in Dawson City in the Yukon Territory. We took an easy start to the morning, enjoying a few last scenes of this fantastic little town while fueling up for the day's drive. But ever onward we must go, and just getting out of town will involve another new experience for us. The George Black Ferry. That's right, to cross the mighty Yukon here requires a ferry ride. Once the river thaws in the spring, the ferry runs 24/7. There is no cost, as it is considered an extension of the Yukon highway system. It arrived in Dawson on June 14th, 1967, after a 7-day journey from Whitehorse that involved running aground on sandbars on 2 separate occasions, able to carry loads of up to 143,000 pounds, and vehicles up to 83 feet long and 17 feet wide. The George Black can handle pretty much anything that will be coming through Dawson City under its own power. Now, on the west side of the Yukon River, we are on the top of the World Highway, or Yukon Highway 9 on a lot of maps. Aptly named, this road stays high on the ridgelines and affords stunning views to the north, with the peaks of Tombstone Territorial Park and the surrounding countryside. As it seemed to be the norm when researching this trip, opinions on the difficulty of this road varied greatly. Everything from a treacherous white-knuckle drive to it just being an easy, mostly gravel road. And while I'm sure weather conditions will definitely play a part, our experience was an easy gravel road. This is the kind of thing we are quite used to, though a typical RVer may certainly not be. Conditions were great, the views were beautiful, and before we knew it, we had covered the 79 miles to the border crossing. Poker Creek is the northernmost international border crossing in North America, and by simply crossing an imaginary line, we will gain an extra hour to our day. The crossing was easy and made enjoyable by the U.S. border agents that talked and joked with us in a way that made it clear they have a pretty awesome job up here in the north.
Doing this drive from Oregon?
Yes. Yep.
Whose idea was it?
It was pretty concurrent between the two of us. Yeah.
You still like each other?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. After crossing into the U.S., you have a stretch of about 14 miles that is called the Boundary Spur Road, and it is beautifully paved and in perfect condition. Now, don't expect this to last, as that eventually turns into gravel at the Jack Wade Junction and is now called Alaska 5, or more commonly, the Taylor Highway. Get used to using highway names and not the numbers. Otherwise, people will think you're from the lower 48. The Taylor quickly changes up the scenery as you drop much lower into the landscape, and you're soon on a small gravel road next to a little creek nestled in the surrounding hills. And despite the official sign we had stopped at earlier, it finally sinks in that we are in Alaska. Passing through Chicken, we had a long yet beautiful drive south on the Tote Cutoff and Glen highways. felt odd to simply be passing through Anchorage at this point, but before we could spend time here, we had business further south. The drive from Anchorage to Seward has to be one of the most stunning drives that you can take that is that close to a major city. Anchorage feels like a big city, primarily because it's geographically large. It feels very spread out, but it still doesn't feel like a quote-unquote big city. And the sheer amount of activities and natural beauty within a reasonable driving distance is mind-boggling. And heading towards the Kenai provides you with some of the very best of that. Resurrection, the act of rising from the dead. Now I've never, not even technically, been dead, but I'm not sure I was ever truly alive before waking up in this place. Our first night truly in Alaska, thousands of miles from the only state that I've called home, parked on a gravel bar of the Resurrection River, fed directly by a mighty glacier. All this eventually flowing into Resurrection Bay in the Pacific Ocean. Apparently, in 1792, Alexander Baranov, a Russian trader and merchant, felt similar. It's said that Baranov was forced to retreat into the bay during a storm, and when that storm lifted, it was Easter Sunday. The bay and the river we are camped in were named Resurrection in honor of that day. And despite this obviously being a popular stop for overlanders from all over the world, the feeling here is still of being somewhere special, close to nature, and relatively far from modern society. Everyone here is living simply and free, with a world of possibilities awaiting us after the morning coffee. With the Resurrection Peaks to our north and Mount Benson to our south, we feel safely enclosed here on the riverbed as we begin to pack up camp. Soon, we really will be flying free towards an experience of a lifetime, where we had a date with Seward Helicopter Tours. Touching an Alaskan glacier was one of Nicole's primary goals on this trip, and this was the best way to absolutely guarantee that that would happen. If you're debating if the cost of something like this is worth it, well, just stop, because it is. Is it a little touristy? Sure, but you'll be able to see why it's worth it. Now, we all know that water is what sustains our lives here on Earth, but simply knowing is another thing entirely to seeing it up close in person, one of the sources of that water. With ice thousands of years old and hundreds, if not thousands of feet thick, you rightly feel small. And even smaller still when you take into account the vastness of the glaciers just in this one general area of Alaska. There are simply too many to name. And yet, there is still a feeling of fragility to these incredibly vast landscapes. There is no denying the changes happening to environments like these in our current age, and I would implore you to visit them while you can.
are here at which glacier?
This is Hawk Glacier.
Hawk Glacier, and we're here with our pilot Jimmy, and he just took us on an amazing ride. So thank you. There you go.
While our time on the glacier was much too short, we weren't yet done with this area. Resurrection Bay was named during a time of contention between the Russians and the indigenous tribes, eventually resulting in the Battle of Sitka, while some sort of peace was eventually made between Baranov and the Tlingit chief Catlian. By the 1940s, conflict had returned. This time, with Alaska now a part of the United States, Fort McGilvary was established to defend Seward and the Alaska Railroad against the fears of a Japanese invasion. After American and Canadian forces reclaimed Attu and Kiska Islands in the Aleutian Islands Campaign between May and August of 1943, Alaska ordered the installations dismantled in March of 1944. Many of the constructions were not yet fully completed. The guns were disassembled and shipped to locations in South Dakota and San Diego, and the buildings were abandoned. In 1971, the Cain's Head Recreation Area was established, and in 1984, the work to clear the old military roads began, and in 2022, the site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Today, you have a few options to access Cain's Head and Fort McGilvary: hiking, kayaking, and water taxi being the primary means. As the tide charts did not cooperate with us hiking all the way in, we elected for a water taxi from Miller's Landing to get us to Cain's Head, where we no longer had to worry about the tides. If you love history, a nice little hike, and maybe even a boat ride, this trip is well worth the time. Once we were back on the river, we would have our first real opportunity to actually fully set up camp, cook a dinner, and just relax. Of course, that would be the time that we would have to deal with a little rain. Our goals with our food for this trip were primarily easy preparation and definitely easy cleanup. We primarily used a combination of pre-cooked chicken and beef strips with the boil and bag rice packets that made life very easy. A variety of sauces kept things interesting. Camp life was kept interesting with periodic blasting from the roadwork around Seward. The morning broke even wetter than the evening before, and we set off for the west side of the Kenai. Of course, the weather eventually cleared a bit, and we were afforded some great views of Mount Redoubt and Iliamna. While we made a roadside breakfast that was much drier than it would have been at camp. We were on this side of the Kenai to hit a couple of those checklist locations. We would be stopping at Anchor Point, which is the furthest west you could drive on the National Highway system, and then driving out onto the Homer Spit, which is the longest road into ocean waters in the world. The day had returned to being a bit gray, and the clouds moved back in, killing the volcano views we would have had at my tentative camp location of Whiskey Gulch. We are currently sitting here at Whiskey Gulch, which is where I kind of plan to camp. Across the way, if there weren't clouds, you would have amazing views of the volcanoes, but those views are gone now. We had them earlier when we came through, so I stopped and got them then with the camera just to make sure. But yeah, so I think we're going to move on. We're going to head back up north to around the Kenai River and see if we can find a good spot to camp there. I've got one known good spot that I stole from someone else, so if we end up there, you'll see that. If that's full, if it's got somebody there, then we'll have to pick out something else. But that's the plan. It's just it's too early in the day to quit yet, so gotta keep moving. We'll see you soon. And while the weather gods were not cooperative, the campsite gods, however, were merciful. From my research, this is actually a well-known location by locals, but while there were people on the other side, the prime, famous spot was wide open. We got everything set up and had a wonderful, relaxing evening that was just what we needed. Even with the rain, this one was worth moving on for. Well guys, we have woken up to a pretty beautiful morning here. The rain finally stopped somewhere during the night, 1-2 a.m. And things are clearing off now. We've got one hill up behind us that the clouds are burning off of. Got a beautiful sunrise. Got a little seagull friend, I'm sure you've seen by now in the video. So we've got a couple neighbors just down the beach, but they've been very quiet, respectful. It's very nice. So yeah, no complaints. A couple mosquitoes this morning, but nothing too crazy. So definitely worth waiting out the rain here last night. So I think we're gonna have a beautiful day. We're going to be heading back up to the Anchorage area. I've got a cabin rented, a little rustic public use cabin rented for a couple days up there so we can check out Anchorage and kind of mess around. So I'm not sure how much of that will show in the video. Not sure how interesting that'll end up being for this type of thing, but we'll see. We might show you some highlights. But as soon as Nick gets up, we'll be actually taking the time to make some real breakfast for once. Haven't done much of that yet this trip. We didn't even eat dinner last night. We ate lunch kind of late. Our time frames and when we're doing things has been pretty off and weird since we've been traveling so much, but the miles have definitely been worth it, and it's only going to get better from here. So after we spend some time in Anchorage and Eagle River, we'll be heading up towards Denali, doing the Denali Highway. Got a cool spot planned for just after that, and then we'll be rolling up to just basically going through Fairbanks, probably be a fuel and resupply stop, and then we'll be hitting the Dalton Highway. So we'll see what transpires up there, but that's days away still. So got lots of good stuff to check out here. But gotta say, Alaska is pretty amazing so far. be sure to tune in for episode 3 when we head north to spend some time in Anchorage to get ready for the beautiful, breathtaking Denali Highway. Be sure to subscribe because this is one you won't want to miss. As always, thank you for coming along for the ride, and we will see you again in the next episode.